Diji Pumbun di donde tela semjen shejaje. Chida yanla chonamla tenne shinda jobata. Tishin Pumbun namdane kunzu semjen shejawo chanita. O suwa nashin chani. Dan digi kare sungore sene chikja tambo niu tambo tegi. Dachi chawa duje jim. Kyuni tawa juwayi. Diji Pumbun di donde tela semjen yuemayi segi. 안에 가사기 다음에 다 당그와리 저희 다음에 대셔고 이제 와 지다야나 초남나 때내 신단 줘봐다 지신 풍부 남대네 군조sem데 아니 군조sem제 시차오 세가로 아니 베데니지 권에 배우권에 아니 라신지 매점 탄예점도 요즘에 마 두시하고 하래
직접 당부디 고라 카레
다시 차와 뒤지셈 다진진디 뒤지셈 다시 차와 뒤짐 침 특정이 저것을 샤오.
So here then there's two verses that are quoted within the commentary on the introduction to the middle way, sutra verses here. And it says that this so-called self is the mind of Mara, the mind of Mara. And this
다시 차와 뒤지셈 괜히 따라 좋아인
괜히 따라
좋아인
it is 괜히
따라 좋아인 다음에는 대화 나서냐면서 자샤나 다시 차와 뒤지셈 세가나 나 진정만 나 진진데 어다 나랑 신이 주와쯤 나랑 신이 주와쯤 쯤바데 아니 뒤치셈레스 란이를 내가 제가 뒤치셈레스 천이 따라 주와인 세가나 아니 가서래 내기 샤완도 송와 나데 아니 다 진진기 샤완도 송와
So here it says that this idea of the self, misconception of the self, is or the self as it's conceived by this the misconception of the self is the mind of Mahara. And here then, this I become under your control. I am dominated by you. So this is holding the self as if it existed intrinsically, whereas in reality, the self does not exist in that way whatsoever. It doesn't exist by means of its own intrinsic nature.
Oh yeah, 누지 분보 디통데 세가나 풍보 가사게 따게 동화. 풍보 가사게 따게 동화 마세 아니 강사 대양 아니 풍보 초발할 때나 따바자 마도 아니 라완도 맞주바.
So then the next lines say that from viewing these aggregates, these created aggregates, one produces the idea of I or self. And so it's out of the apprehension of the aggregates as if they existed intrinsically by means of their own autonomous character or autonomous nature. Based upon that misapprehension, that one forms the misconception that the I or the self is intrinsically existing or autonomous. So it's attributed, that is the concept of the self as being intrinsically existent is designated or is formed, conceptually constructed based upon the observation of the aggregates as if they were intrinsically existent.
Oh yeah, that digi Lucy Pumbo did on the Dilla Semjan Yamayin Segi I Pumbo Casa Rawan Casa Daki Tombatang. 가사양 아니 가서 라운드 마주바 가사 그 다음에 가사다 풍부니워데 라신지 마주장 아니 때문에도 미줘와 아니 라신지 주바 가장 아니 타냐 좀도 여봐 땡야 되라 기타 양라 초남라 땡네 신다 줘봐 다르 신디 양라 초점라 아니 신다 줘봐 다스 신디 양라 레레와당 초바당 초비 입라서와 강양 아니 신당의 매나양 아니 신다양라 초점지 띵도 신다시 타냐도 여봐 나신 전에 그와 기타양라 초남라 땡네 신다 줘봐 다르 베스체
So here then, the aggregates are created, that is, they're created phenomena, and it's based upon the created the aggregates themselves, which are created phenomena, and misconceiving them as if they were intrinsically existent. That one then forms the idea of the self or the I as if it were intrinsically existent or had this autonomous character that is falsely attributed to it. So we form the concept of I or self based upon, again, this misapprehension of the way in which the I exists in relationship to its basis of designation, the created aggregates. But the fact that it is not intrinsically existent or autonomous entails then that it is merely conventionally existent, that is, that it exists merely nominally as it's designated based upon its basis of designation. And then in the rest of these verses from the sutra, it's explained how this is exactly, exactly in the same fashion that one forms the idea or concept of a cart based upon the collection of the components that make up a part. When the collection of components that make up that are the basis for identifying a thing as a cart, then one forms the concept cart and the name cart and attributes it to that thing. But it's just as in the case with the self or the I. It's not that the case that the cart that the cart exists intrinsically. Rather, it's simply a conventional designation that we use to identify that thing.
Oh yeah. 시다야 가서 때는 신다 줘봐다. 티신 풍부 남대네 군조 섬제 세차오 세가라. 안에 뒤가라야. 안에 가사 타녀도 여주. 가사 그 풍부를 레와당. 풍부 초바당. 풍부 초비 입당. 다 강양 안에 가사 마이장 풍부 초바라 때네 아니 가사시와 나신 전에 가사 생각돼 낭잠도 여봐대 타녀도 여봐대라 나 주카랑 그때는 대리 나 가사 알아도 얘기 니셔도 가지고 가나 풍부 초바라 맞아와 아니 주사미 주마이 메밀루메 랑가메 나시 마이 김 그나 텔레션에 주 강스 자주 가나 아니 감축이 안에 감레레와야 주 마이 감주 뒤와양 도바임 아니 주 마이 감주기 뒤에 입양 마이 다 두시 제외 가나 오나 다 주 가와 요아래 세나 아니 다 가소래 타녀점도 여봐 감주 초발라 감주 뒤와담 감주 초발라 때네 아니 민기 타녀지 왕게 샥 점도 낭점도 여봐태라 아니 다 디시 섬전 남대나 군조 섬전 세샤오 세오 다 두순 거래.
So just as the case with the cart then, cart is a conventional name, a designation that we use to identify a thing, which is in fact a composite, a collection of various kinds of parts. And then so that that identity doesn't exist within the collection of the parts. It's not something about the shape or configuration of the parts. It's not any of the parts individually of the thing we identify as a cart. Rather, the name cart or the conventional designation cart is simply attributed to or designated upon that thing, that collection of parts. But as the designation as such and the name, the cart, is not findable within the collection or the configuration of the parts or what have you. So in the end of the sutra quotation there, it says, just like that, we say, the Buddha here is saying, the 강삭 공소비어, 강삭.
지다 양라做了那等的新的结巴的体系풍부 남的呢工作生产协调
So just as in dependence upon the collection or the composite, you could say, of the parts that compose the thing that we identify as a cart, we name that a cart, and we identify it as with that name. So similarly, in the same fashion, the quotation from the sutra says that phenomenally we say a sentient being in dependence upon the collection or some composite collection of the created aggregates. So the created aggregates collectively are then sort of the basis of designation, which we then identify by saying the word, by identifying it as a sentient being. And that's merely phenomenal, merely a phenomenal process of designation. And then the same thing then, I missed, what follows that? 롱차스.
당에 다진 두스 라이 마 단다 풍부 남대네 군조 섬제协调 세대 다시 풍부 초발라 때네 다바레 두스 자인 바是吧 다 코란데 렌지 팀이 사샤가라 아니 강사 소지 잠바 근데 샤고레 이제 주선미 추마니 메밀루미 남셰미 아니 가서 대란 무슨 교강세 메밀라 나시 많이 꾸면나 대래선이 교강세가라 아니 감도 뒤와라 때나 따바 현상 감도 레레 와야 교 말에 감도 뒤와야 따바마 따도 말에 是吧 워낙 가르래서나 교가 여와래서나 감도 뒤발라 때는 다시 감도 쏴봐대 전에 대 뒤발라 때는 안에 딱점도 낭점도 여와래
So then this statement from the sutra, which we find in the commentary in to the introduction of the Middle Way, is stated in, or the same intention is stated here in the text in the precious Garland that we're studying back when we read the verse 80, went through the verse 80, where it says that the person here, this word person could mean like the human being, or it refer to person in general. Is not earth, is not water, is not fire, is not wind, is not space, is not consciousness, and it's not all of these. And there's nothing then apart from those six constituents that collectively compose the basis for identifying a person. Apart from that collection, what person exists? So this shows exactly the same idea that we found in the sutra quotation. That is that the collection of these six constituents is the basis for identifying or designating the thing as a person. But it's this collection, the person as such, is not the collection of the six constituents. The person as such is not any of them individually. You take them, water, fire, earth, water, fire, etc., up through consciousness. The person is not any of those individually. The person is not the collection as such. Rather, it is simply a convention which is designated based upon that collection of constituents And so, in that sense, it's a mere appearance. It's simply an appearance, a simple convention that we use to identify that sort of thing in that way as a person. But it's not the case that it exists, that person exists within that basis of designation. Rather, it's person is a name identity which we attribute to that collection of things.
오야 덴데 린진 정확히 논되게 아니 가상 공도 샤바 나신 전에 다음에 니니라 아니 차라니 차라스는 뭐또 깔아 샤베 가상가 쉬어이 봐 어디야 안디 된거 아래 주사미 주머니 뭐메 루메 남셰메 암셰 마요 그이나 텔레세니 교강 세기 안에 가사 그 다음에 때니 가사 다음에 응라 또니 되네 대신 감리를 장 뉘지 양다 니도 미 세가나 감 두고 안에 가사 고도 샤바초와 나신 제를 상감도 소와를 양 안에 랑게 차샤 뒤와라 때네 따와자 마도 안에 아라왕공 오 매바데 땜바 인상 치이다메 제래 때네 옹원도 가사 그 다음에 안에 때네 땜비림비 온도 전에 가사 다음에 온도 때네 뒤지에서 치이다메 땜바 또 비림비 온도 전에야 가사 다음에 온도 또네 뒤오도 안에 치이다메 또봐.
So here then, the reason this has been introduced initially is that this is the way in which one teaches selflessness. That is, first one teaches the selflessness of the person, and then one explains the selflessness of other phenomena apart from the person. So in the verse that we just went through, that demonstrates the selflessness of the person, that the person does not exist as a intrinsically existent self, autonomously and so forth, as mentioned above, because it's not found within its basis of designation, the collection of the constituents that serves as the basis for designating a thing as a person. So when one goes through and establishes first one establishes that selflessness of the person, then once that's been established, then one shifts to establishing the selflessness of other phenomena. In this case, it's the selflessness of the phenomena that compose the basis of designation here, that is, the constituents of the person themselves individually do not possess a self or an intrinsic nature, some kind of autonomous character. Rather, when you examine them, each of these components or constituents that serves as the basis for the designation of the person, then you find that each of them is equally devoid of any kind of intrinsically existent self or autonomous character, autonomous nature that could be attributed to them. So this sequence of explaining the two forms of selflessness, first introducing selflessness of person, then explaining selflessness of phenomena, coincides with the process of understanding the selflessness as well. Because in understanding selflessness, first we understand the selflessness of persons, and then understand the selflessness of phenomena.
Oh yeah, 가지 다때때도 풍부니 nga자리 안에 가지 셈지 돼 세가나 nga 적당데라 아니 풍부 초바 강사도 정게 양셈 예진의 천시진 남시 강사도 정게 오요아 인상 준다 엄마 인자 초바 강사 마인 바데 간데 주고 와래서나 아니 다 가소래 초바 풍부 나시 풍부 초바데 강사게 딱시래 나시대 딱쳐서 미루마 인상 너네 풍부 때네 이송바 대지 풍부 되삼다 많이 전에 엄마 집에 나라서 마데 풍부 다시 풍부 초바데 아니 강사 강라 따바게 딱해 나시래 나시대 딱쳐 임바데 미루바 인상 초바 가사 많이 봐. 그봐. 어떻습니까?
So here then, now, when explaining the selflessness of the person and the way we've done it above, the issue arises that some other schools of Buddhist philosophy would say that it's the collection of the aggregates, which are the person, that the aggregates as a collection are the person, and not only other Buddhists, but some other philosophers might say that. And then other philosophers might say, Buddhist and non-Buddhist might say that it's the mental consciousness, which is the sort of the thing which is identifiable as the person, the thing to be identified as a person. However, we're explaining that neither of those is the case. The collection of the aggregates is not the person. Likewise, the mental consciousness is not the person, because this way of explaining it entails a conflation of the designation and the thing which is designated. Here, the aggregates, the collection of the aggregates, we can say, is the basis for the designation, whereas the person is the designated property or the designation itself, which is attributed to that collection. So, but the basis of designation is not the same as the designation or the designated property, here meaning the identity of the thing as the person. Those two are not identical.
인상 대라 때는 따반이지 다시 때 많이 받도록 돼. 리생이 몰라요. 아니 대라 때는 따반 인상 다시 때 밤에 많이 고그래. 빼나 중화 주체네 뭐 따와 나시래. 중화 주체네 뭐 따와 나시래. 대잖니 수와 나시 제가라 다시라 아니 다쳐도 많이 빠지고 하래. 난 다시 많이 빠지고 그게나 아니 나 초바대 아니 가사 많이나 아니 너희 가서래 초바 가사 순두가 가서 녀알이 풍봉은 어디다 관나 그정도 잠세다 풍봉은 녀알이 풍봉은 어디다 따오시 순두가 풍봉은 어디 가사 자네 대라 아니 직다게 미바 샤두가 사나 니 가르친 거래서 그정도 잠세다 풍봉은 어디다 녀알 풍봉은 관나 따오세데 풍봉을 때네 따윈 알람이 바샤바름 마도 풍봉아 초바 풍봉아 아니 직다게 미바 샤바나 봐 그래서
이 당부리 그래서
엘라 때네 따바 니지 다시데 마그레 강사데 풍보라 따바 인바 인장 아니 다시데 강사 많이 고그래
페나
중앙 교체네
중앙 교체
중앙 사실 밀로 중앙 치 교체네 뭐 따바 나시래
So here then, it's inappropriate to say that the position that the other philosophers are advocating here, that the collection of the aggregates, for example, is the person here. That's wrong because it entails the confusion or conflation of the identity that is the person as with the thing which is identified here, that is the collection of aggregates. It's based upon this collection that one forms the idea person, but it's not the case that person is the actual five aggregates, so the collection of the five aggregates. So the example that's given to illustrate this is like when we, based on some configuration of material of matter, then we form the earth, water, fire, and wind together in some combination. That combination of matter forms a basis for us to see something as a patch of blue, for example. But it's not the case that that patch of blue is identical with, is in fact that configuration of matter. Rather, the vision or the perception of the patch of blue arises from that configuration of matter, but it's not the same as the configuration of matter. So similarly, the same thing applies to the identification of the person based upon the collection or combination of the 5 aggregates being present, or the 6 constituents if you analyze the basis of designation in that way. The person that's designated based upon the collection of the aggregates or the composite collection of the 6 constituents is not identified based upon that. That is, the concept I or person arises or is produced based upon observation of the 5 aggregates or the 6 constituents, but it's not the case that the person or I is identical with its basis of designation. Here then, at the end of this, there's a point that I'm missing. I'm forgetting.
강란 낚시 때 강답에 딱지도 많이 막힌 거예요. 딱 풍부 강 낚시 인상 딱지 강상 말했을 거라고. 나한테 난신 중앙 주제는 뭐 따와라도 뭐 중앙 말했어. 내가 그랬어.
디랍스 디 죽라. 디랍스.
낚시 풍부 다게 낚시래대 풍부가 말했어.
그래서 디랍스. 디 죽라.
개줄에 다 다가래. 되는 제일 갈라야 내가 제 자시다. 다 뒤에서야. 근데 인상다. 다 가서래 전다도 어디 가듯이 오래 sana 아니 나 여사한테 가와지래 요아래 sana 아니 감주 묘와라 때나 딱바점도 여바데 안 나타내도 여바데 감주 초바데 나이 다시티체 풍봉아 초바데 나이 다시티체 풍봉아 초바 코랑 나 많이 양 풍봉아 초바라 때네 나시 민잠 다잠도 여바데 나타내도 여비트는데체 그러나 나와지 맞으장 그러나
So here then, this is illustrating how it is that we form the conventional identity of the I or the self, the conventionally existing I or self. That idea, concept is formed based upon the collection of the 5 aggregates, or the collection of the 6 constituents. The collection of the 5 aggregates is not the I, is not the self. Likewise, the collection of the 6 constituents is not the I, is not the self. Rather, the I or the self, when we say I, we form this idea based upon some observation of the 5 aggregates or collection of the 6 constituents, but that I or self is a convention by which we designate that collection of aggregates or collection of constituents.
대마주 다시 너희 가서 니말에 풍봉아 어디다 코나를 따고 세 대마루도 세래 어디 되는데 다 가서 풍보 당진기 미바마이나 직다기 미바마이나 아니 너희 가서 아니 직다기 풍보라 미바샤도가 근데 샤도고서나 니말에 풍봉아 어디다라 따오스도가 풍보라 따샤도가 풍보 미바샤도가 원디 풍보를 미바샤바 말해서 풍보라 때네 따비 나 미바샤바를 말도 풍보 미바샤바 말해서
So here then, the portion that I forgot previously is that in the sutra, it's explained, there's a passage in sutra where the Lord Buddha says that when one thinks of self or thinks of self, one is viewing the five aggregates. So some other philosophers would then say that sutra passage is evidence, indicates then that it's the five aggregates, the collection of the five aggregates themselves that are the object which is observed when one forms the idea of self. However, that is not the case. What is being indicated there is that it's based upon the observation of the five aggregates collectively that one forms the idea of I or self. And so one has to make this distinction between the observed object here, which is based upon which, that is the observed object here being the collection of the five aggregates, and then based upon, from that observation, then the idea or concept of I or self arises, the conventional designation by which one identifies the collection of the five aggregates. That arises based on that, and then misconstruing that as being an intrinsically existing thing, having autonomy is the misconception, which is the misconception of the self or I.
Oh yeah, that 다중 휴와데 타냐도 여장, 구조담도 여장, 안에 라왕도 매바데. 다단테 가상의 마음 방제 소위와 이제 가상의 순잠데 소소라메 중화남 소소랑장 갈라요. 소소라메 세제양미 천이단의 군조 세대게 다 가르송과를 소소라메 랑중화 중화 소소의 아니 소소라메 중화남 세가나 중화 소소랑게 천이 소소랑 중화 소소랑게 랑게 천이 되서나 중화 소소랑게 천이 가르서나 사신 태와 사사소 사이 천이 사 아니 가소래 추 셔와 메스 아니 차와 농여와 다 소소랑게 천이 좋아라 중화 소소랑게 천이 돼 다 랑은 주비 랑은 어이 갈아야 돼요 말에 랑은 주바 말에 랑자지 주바 말에 소소라메 와 내가 가르래서 중화남 소소랑 매비철 중화남 소소 중화 소소 내가 요 말에 와 소소 내가 매비철 소소라메 중화남 소소랑자 갈아요.
So then in the analysis of the components, the basis of designation for the self or I, then in the analysis we arrived at the verse 89, where at the beginning of which it says, how can elements that do not exist on their own have any intrinsic characteristics? Or one could just translate that actually as characteristics alone here. When the elements themselves don't exist individually on their own, how could their individual characteristics exist, is literally the translation of those first two lines of 90. And then the commentary here says, it's the case that these individual characteristics of things here, individual characteristics means the specific characteristics or properties, one could say, of the four elements. So earth has the property of being hard, and water has the property or characteristic of being flowing or liquidity, one could say. Earth has the property or characteristic of solidity. Water has the property of liquidity. Fire has the property or characteristic of heat. And wind has the property of motility, movement or motion. So these characteristics of the individual elements, the question is, how could they exist by means of intrinsic character? Now, intrinsic character indicates here again, the concept of autonomy or intrinsic existence. So, and the answer is that it's impossible for them to exist in that way because, and then the reason given for that is that the elements themselves don't exist individually on their own.
Oh yeah. 다더니 가서래 대와 대장 세치 중요 중화 소소 대장 아니 가서래 세치 중 예배 아니 세치 중 예배 천이 세치 중 비교요 말이 라서나 그와 대장 세치 중 예배 치중 예배 천이 세치 중 미바 세치 중 미비치나 교요 말이 시량자 바텔라 누비세 세치 중양 랑거 뭐 주바미요 말이 메디 타지 때 맞대봐 소소랑 소소기랑 랑거 천이 요 말이 세야되나 소소라메 세제민 소소라메 세제민 세 어디서 소소라메 세제민 세간 대장 세제 중 예배 천이 세제 중 미비지 세나양 대한 태그 말이 뉴와디 대와디 뉴위 세나양 세치 중양 세치 중 대양 아랑공의 주바이와 말이 명확하래서나 떼매도 소소라 매비체 반죽 때와 마도 떼매도 소소 매아래.
So then the third line in the verse says, since they don't exist individually, it's not the case that there is a different preponderance of them. This is referring here to the characteristics. If the characteristics of the individual elements existed intrinsically, they had their own intrinsic nature. Some kind of existed by me. If these characteristics or properties existed by means of their own intrinsic character or property, then the following problems would arise. Here, the opponent comes back and says, "Well, when we observe when the elements exist, the elements as such, they exist mixed together in various combinations." And therefore, there's a different preponderance of the different specific properties or specific characteristics of the different elements, earth, water, fire, wind, the heat, liquidity, and so forth, are mixed in different proportions. So therefore, because we see this difference, different proportions or different preponderance of the different characteristics of the different elements when we observe a physical or material thing, then therefore they exist in that way. They have this intrinsic character. But the reply to that is that's not tenable either. It's not possible for that to occur, because when they're combined together, that is, the elements are mixed together, combined, then even though it is the case that there's a different preponderance of their different quantities, you could say, or different preponderance of their specific characters, their specific properties occurring, this is not established by means of its own intrinsic character. That is, the different preponderance of the properties of the elements is not established by means of its own intrinsic character, because and the reason that it establishes that is that they don't exist individually without being contingent upon one another. That here, this indicates that the characteristics of heat, liquidity, motility, and so forth, they themselves exist in a contingent and cooperative fashion, and therefore do not exist on their own individually.
Oh yeah, 나 가서랑 공부에 주반 매와다 때문에도 소사람 매비치를 간데 나 바로 보기 때문에도 소사랑 매와다 캐내고 말해대 란전지 줍나 란전지 주비 소소와이나 때문에도 공고와 인장 안디 공고하리 얘나다 청업인 돌에 안에 소소랑 그 천이 여봐 소소 란산지 주바 샤바타단 가기도가 가로 셔나 아니 다 대답 민가와디 가르레서나 천이단이 군접셰 세 청원박이 안도람 비수바데 셰그 말에서 대 가르레서네 중앙 남지 천이단이 군조도 여바 민담 다담 여바라 관해서 민담 군조도 여바 다시 시원다 민담 다담라 관해 여바라 관해 샤와지 아니 중앙 남지 소소 여바데 샤와를 마도 중앙 소소 랑공 오이 고이네 아니 소소 여바데 미시그 말이 오이 여바 미시베 셀 세야잖아 천이단이 군조셰
근데 충남기 친이 디
천이단이 군조셰에서 최고미 도에 가서 중앙 소소 그 안에랑 그 천이 주와 샤바테단 가그레외서나 가그 말이 최고미 도에 가서 중앙 남자랑 그 천이 소소 샤바여 봐 송바데 아니 가르에서나 공시 가르를 공부해서 중앙 남자 천이 군조도 여봐 민담 군조도 여봐 민담 다담라 아니 권에 여봐 샤바를 마데 중앙랑 그 천이 뭐 여봐 권에 샤바 말이
So here then the opponent here comes back and says, well, now it says in the Abhidharma Sutra, that is the sutra which explains metaphysics and other aspects of philosophy, that each of the elements have their own individual characteristics. The Lord Buddha has taught that elements have their own specific characteristics. Now, the opponent here has the assumption that the specific characteristics of things, that is the heat of fire, is the specific character or characteristic of the thing. That exists by means of its own intrinsic identity. So they make the assumption that intrinsic characteristic, having an intrinsic, a specific property or a specific character, such as the fire having heat as its specific character or specific property, they assume that entails that specific property or character is established by means of its own intrinsic identity. So they're conflating intrinsic character and intrinsic identity as if they were the same thing, or specific. They're conflating specific character, uncommon character of a thing like fire. Heat is the specific character of fire. They're assuming that entails that fire, that the heat exists as the specific character of fire by means of an intrinsic identity, and this is rejected here. It says that. So the reply to that is that our explanation here does not contradict the explanation that elements have their own specific characteristics or properties as it's explained in the Abhidharma Sutra. This is not contradictory because, and then the last line in the verse here says that that identity is, or here when there's an ambiguity in the word used here. It says characteristic, but one can translate this equally as identity, is explained as being merely phenomenal. So here then, the specific, the identity of the elements, we identify fire as that which is hot. That identity is merely a convention, or is something that merely is established phenomenally, and therefore it's merely a name, it's merely a symbol. With that kind of intention in mind, Lord Buddha has explained that the elements have these specific properties, but he was not holding the position here that these characters of things, or these characteristics of things, these identities of things, exist by means of intrinsic identity. That is, the identity is not established in some kind of intrinsic fashion in that way.
Oh yeah, that. 대제 다 되니 네 이제 그 중화라신지 주와 가바데 치네 다 중화 중주라신지 주바 가바 중화의 규비를 자 당 중주지를 자세 가나다 카도 치루 잠바 줘봐 나서와 그다 가야 되라 잠바 중주라신지 주와 가바니 카도 치루를 바강 대달라야 추디인 다 중화라신지 주와 가비를 바텔라 때네 안에 중주라신지 주와 가고 인장 카도당 치루 안에 리자 강인바 대다 양 라신지와 말이 라신지 매바 카도 치루리바 강 라신지 매바 가르레서 중화 라신지 매비 두지 대다 라 어디 가서 중주 대다 라양 카도 치루리바 라서 리자라서 중주 대다 라양 공도 중화 라신지 주바 까바기 안에 리바디 수 자나 자와 차와 이베 리바 테나신기 리바데 디 dob지 아니 중요라시 메바 주바레 세르 디임발라 가세 카도 치루레 바야 대달라야 추디미 세 라시지 주와 고비 추디 자라 차와 임비체
So here then, next this leads into a rejection, a refutation that the things that are derived from the elements are established by means of intrinsic nature. Here, things derived from the elements, you have the four elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, and in combination then these elements form the sort of physical basis of the world, and then derived from those elemental combinations, then one has the perceptible qualities of things such as color, smell, taste, tactile things, and so these color, smell, taste, and tangible objects are what are called the derivatives of the elements. These sensible properties of things, of physical things, are derived from the elements. So these things as well are not established by means of their own intrinsic nature, because the same process of analysis that we've employed above in showing how it is that the elements themselves are not established by means of intrinsic nature is applicable to these entities as well. Just as one has shown that the elements themselves, earth, water, fire, and wind, are devoid of any kind of intrinsic nature, the same thing applies to these sensible objects, visible things and so forth, which are color and shape and so forth, that are derived from the material elements themselves. So the commentary here explains that color, smell, taste, and tangible objects, all of those also do not exist by means of their own intrinsic nature. Because those, one can apply here to these the same exact reasoning that we employed above in the context of rejecting or negating that the elements themselves are established by means of their own intrinsic nature.
Oh yeah, tenita riba jaya riba de yage susub rimin de la min se de yage ta yage 중순 산민 딜라 민 세대단다 집바자 집바디 중순 산민 딜라 민세 텔라디미 테메 민세 다 공투시에 그 중화라 제베 리바텔라 아니 수순 리민 딜라 민세 가나 수순보다 카도다 치다 로체 리제체 가나 다 되라 수순 리민 딜라 민세 제소 자바라 차오
So then there's a reason. Zuxum regment de la min.
Zuxum regment de la min is Java Chow. Say, Diaga Dua. Juma Legata Dua. Zuxum Samin de la min says, what I did not say.
So there's another place where it said that the three physical things here, one can read the three physical things, that is color, taste, and smell, are not tactile objects, and these three other physical things do not exist in that which is tangible, which can be experienced through tactile perception. So we're going to apply this, the statements there as well, that kind of reasoning which is given elsewhere in this context as well.
Oh yeah, that didn't kondo sheba ke jungwa rashi chuwa kaya ke riba teta. Jungwa rashi ni meba juba nashin da riba teta ta che shen la ma jani. Ane riba tela che shen la jawa ngwa da rashi ji tongbi xie je ni yue bi na ne che shen la jewa tela. Tene da mi dan su dan mi dan nam xie su nam tang. 어때서 가라 안에 가서 유한 남시숨 유수 아 대안보 달라템베 남시 체가라 아니 미다수다 미다 남시 수남탕 말을 내다 깨와탕 근데 야라 중요근아리 꿀로 말을 받아 비왕기 사빈 내다 달라테네 주위 깨와탕 와 제보 내당 차와창 내 제보보다 자유유당 아니 저다다 뭐 되는 거야 아니 이니 제제 어다더니 연당 중에도 도 정도 와당에 자기 내나 미단 남시 수당 수남당 세가나 대안보 달라템베 남시 유수남당 아니 말을 받당 디 왕기 사벨에 이번 되지를 내다 깨웠음 말을 내다 깨웠음 제보 내다 자와당 내 제보보다 아니 내당 자왔음고 자왔음 자제 내숨 지당 태달라 소와기 장 아니 편진 채박이 양바 저와 아니 대우제지 그 주당 텔라제와기 때문에 제부 내와다 마음바라 소와기 뒤 대마음 됐음 입기 뒤와 아니 더 콘드샤바네 퉁오다 림보라 소와 소바기 얘게 퉁다 림둥 소 셰와기 셰자 소자되기 아니 입 주시 와다 입 dum보 어더니 민당现在民党明显提醒我，现在人党庭上同党人说现在的民党明显提醒我谁干了？我不当团结你完了所谓，俺的民党是吧？我不希望给民党，我希望民抗了就是给俺的是民间团结你完那么讲，那么讲。空都中完了大年，让星期出吧，中完了大年大兴，准备出吧提醒了，是我准备他了大年，我让星期没出吧，我准备拿星期年大，我空都下边中完太大当，让星期没出吧，准备出吧拿星，但是空都下边个，俺那现在就这样的人，是的。
So then verse 92, the first half of verse 91 and verse 92 explains applying this kind of reasoning or the analysis here that's been given above, the conclusion of the analysis given above to other phenomena as well. So the first half of 91 says, This approach also applies to colors, odors, tastes, and tactile objects. Such is also the case with the eye, faculty, consciousness, and visible form, ignorance, karma, and birth, agent, object, and action. I'm changing patient to object here. Also number, conjunction, cause and effect in time, long and short, and so on. Here, they're translating this as designation and designated. I would say name and that which is named, more literally, in the translation there. So here it goes through these lists of sets of things and individual things. And so first comes the eye. Here, this is referring to the visual faculty. The visual faculty as such, that is the eye organ and the as a sense organ, and then visual consciousness, which arises based upon the eye, the visual organ, and then the object of those two visible forms. These three together make a set. That is, with the eye organ intact and functioning, visible form present, then the eye awareness of visible objects, vision occurs, those three. And then next set is ignorance, karma, and birth. This is referring then to the set of the initial ignorance, which forms the basis for the beginning of the process of dependent origination, the 12 factors, and then karma, which is produced out of that ignorance, and then when it accumulates the karmic propensities within one's mind stream that then give rise to the birth or arising of all of the various forms of suffering within the samsaric causality. Those three as a set. And then there's agent, object, and action. In any kind of relationship of activity, there's an agent, an object, and an activity, action itself. Those three. And then there's numbers such as one and so forth, or one can read this as things being single or identical and different. Identity and difference is another set. And then contact in which things are in mutual contact with each other. Cause and effect, or one could read that just as one thing, as causality as such. Time referring to the three times past, present, and future. And then shapes such as, things that are short and things that are long, which are long and short, which are included within the category of shape of things. And the word etc. in the verse indicates things like a square and round or spherical and so forth, these various kinds of shapes, all of those. Then the category of thing, here functioning thing, that is an existent which is involved in activities. And then likewise the category of causal efficacy or ability to perform an activity, that category. All of these things are names. We employ these names, and then there are the objects of these names, the things that are so named. All of these, if one investigates them or examines them in the same way that we did with respect to the elements, then one finds that just like the self, when we initially began investigating selflessness, we said that the self is conceived and attributed to the collection of the aggregates in the same way that the snake is falsely attributed to the coiled rope. And so just as the self in that sense is false, is unreal, then similarly, and we've established that such an intrinsically existent self is false and is unreal, then likewise all of these categories of names and the things that are identified with those names, that possess those names, are equally false and unreal.
Oh yeah, that day, that diwa, that Rashi Dombi, Cheshan Java, Rashi Domba, Cheshan Java, the Chin, that Rashi Dombi, 세제 대라 균전 세제 거바 대라 삽제 시에 빛나네 안에 최고 라신 동비 전담바 대라 다 가르사나 사단 매단 사단 추단 매단로 린단 차단 봄니탕 개소연이 세도와 고대 가르송 거래에서나 사체 추단 매 중화시 아니 중주기 나나 rinwa당 통화 아니 차와당 bomba 아니 가소래 남이 대화 진제기 개화당 농아 진제기 미개화당 아니 롱도 마담바 다 대다 최전도 손에 대다랑신지 좋아요 말에세 그래서 니니 쓰라 랑신지 좋아요 말에 남시수 가봐 줄 세대 랑신지 좋아 매대 남시수 남시 그래서 니니 남시수 가봐 주시 퇴송 사대기다 군전 시작하래 랑신지 좋아 매대 연나 파배냠샤기 수요가와 강시 와 아니 남시수대에서 남시스데 파바냠샤기 싱어를 가바를 매밤 싱어를 가바 주와데 아니 좀 내대 숨버체
So then the next verse begins a demonstration or an exposition that all of these things are empty of intrinsic existence, intrinsic nature. And then, so at the beginning of this is the actual explanation of the meaning of the meaning of all phenomena being empty of intrinsic nature. And this is in verse 93. And that says, the sage has stated that earth, water, fire, and wind, short and long, so subtle and coarse, I would say probably thick, thin and thick, virtue and so on, cease in consciousness. It says here awareness, but I'm going to translate this as consciousness. And then in parentheses, they say of the ultimate. So here then, earth, water, fire, wind are the elements. And then the long and short, thin and thick, these are like the visible qualities of which are derived from the elements in terms of visible objects, have these properties of being long and short and so forth, or thick and thin. And then virtuous, non-virtuous, and neutral, the three forms of karma that we engage in. These things are here the subject of what is being said here, and the thesis these are said to be to be non-existent in the sense of being established by means of their own intrinsic nature. That's the statement. And then the proof for that is that if these things did exist, that is, existed by means of their own intrinsic nature, then it would be necessary for them to be seen by the Arya's meditative equipoise. The Arya's meditative equipoise would have to see them. And in consciousness, here the word consciousness is indicating the perspective of that specific kind of vision, the Arya's vision, which sees reality. Those are, it said, ceased. That is, they are non-existent. And the Buddha has said this.
Oh yeah. Yena papa nyamshaki si gowa kanshi namshi ti se papa nyamshaki shi namshi ti singor gaba juba de tuya sumbi chire se date kasan ngazo dala tuyansonga ase zhewa ni shi shiten ba se kasan kama tuyan ba nyamshaki si gowa le se ka nyamshaki cik te zam ma yin ba nyamshaki cheni si bi singor si gowa le se right? 중시 지당 파바 냠샤기 시와르 치다와 또빈 암지기 시와르와 지다도 냠샤데 지다도 넘바 탐이 신비 시대 냠샤데 되게 중시 쓰여와 인자 파파 냠샤게 중시 쓰여와체 단단 니 파파 냠샤게 쓰여고 와라 남시 디 생活로 세데 파파 냠샤기 취니시비 생活 쓰여고 와래 가사 임바 남시디 디 취니시비 생활로 마세와 가버려 줘와
So here we have to specify what is meant by within the perspective of the vision of the Arya and the meditative equipoise, the vision of the Arya and meditative equipoise here. That has to be carefully specified because it is the case actually that there are examples of an Arya's gnosis, for example, a Buddha's gnosis in meditative equipoise, which sees and to which appear all of these various things that have been described above, listed above. That is, in the context of that, a Buddha's gnosis, which understands things in their diversity, all of these various kinds of long and short and earth, water, and so forth. All of these things do in fact appear, and they're seen by that vision. However, in the case of the Arya's meditative equipoise, or the statement here, which says that earth, water, and so forth, long and short, all of these things, virtue and non-virtue, etc., do not exist, are ceased and do not exist within the perspective of the Arya's meditative equipoise, that kind of vision. Here one has to specify that it's from the perspective of the Arya's meditative equipoise, which is viewing nature, which is viewing nature. Here, nature is a word for emptiness, the emptiness of things. And within the perspective of that vision of nature as such, there's no appearance of these various phenomenal things such as earth, water, fire, wind, and so forth. All of those have ceased within the context of that kind of vision, and therefore, they're non-existent from the perspective of that meditative absorption on nature.
Oh yeah, that then, Rashi don't be turned Dambadang, Dambaki turned the young Shabatella. You are Shabani, Namshi Deme Tayaba, Kundu Dabu Telani. Segana. 미도빈 남시 때문에 미도빈 남시 소소란 게 리바 차와 단냠샤 소소란 게 리바 차와서나 춘용무슨 도비 시대라 아니 미도비 시에서 그래 니난다 차와 미도비 시 소소란 게 리바 차와 세대 다 돈용무슨 도비 시대라 소소란이 리바 차와 시한란 디오 시 냠샤디기 천이 수수 된데지래 세샹라 땡도 매봐 인자 남셰 때문에 땡도 매봐 세자 타야비 내루라 왕주와 세가 남셰 때문에 타야봐 세자 타야비 내루 아동반이라 왕주에 안에 군도 다보 텔라니 텔라 쳐져서 군도 다보 테 와 인자 군도 다보 텔라니 야.
So then there's an explanation of this given in the following verse, which says that this consciousness is not demonstrable to others. It's limitless, and it's the Lord of all. That's the first two lines of it. So this consciousness here is referring to this gnosis, the Arya's meditative equipoise on nature, the nature of things, which is emptiness, and that non-conceptual consciousness is the gnosis under discussion here, and that specific form of gnosis, the non-dual, is non-dual because it's free from any kind of duality of subject and object with respect to its object, the emptiness here. There's no such duality within it. And it's something to be experienced oneself. And because it's only to be experienced individually by oneself, then it's impossible that one can show it to others, saying, "Here it is." One cannot sort of demonstrate it to others in the same way that it is experienced personally by oneself. It's this awareness or gnosis, this consciousness, has control over all of the limitless objects of knowledge. That is, it has control or dominion over the way in which things exist. That is, the basic nature way, or the way in which all objects of knowledge, all limitless objects of knowledge actually exist. So here, this way things exist is referring again to emptiness. So, and that's because it has that kind of dominion over the way things are, the emptiness, then it's called this Lord of all. That's the first two lines out of the verse 94.
Oh, yeah. 사단 추단 매단이 룽게내도 주마인 세텐다위 안녕자 남밤에도 비시 되게 생활라 아니 사단 매단 룽게 추지 생활로 내 토바 주와 많이 봐서 생활 여봐 주봐 내 토바 생활 여봐 주봐 말에 많이 봐 가르래잖아 되게 춘이시비 생활로 사단 매단 룽 추지 아니 중사장 마스비치 중사장 마스비치
So then the last part of the verse says, in the commentary here is explained that that earth, water, fire, and wind don't find any kind of foundation within your perspective. Your is here in reference to that gnosis, which understands the basic nature of things, emptiness. And so it says that these earth, water, fire, and wind don't find any foundation. Here, that means that they don't exist as objects, as something which is to be, things which are to be apprehended or cognized within the perspective of that gnosis.
내 토바 주나 주와서 생을 여발을 자초 거래. 생을 내봐. 생을 여봐.
So they don't exist. These earth, water, fire, and wind, and so forth don't exist. That is, they're not something that has a foundation or something which is apprehendable within the perspective of that gnosis, the vision of that gnosis.
다 되게 중시랑신지 tum나 중시 파파냠샤 이些그 천이 세비 생을 장신지 tum나 중시 댐바 투고 댐바 인고 중시 댐바 인나 파파냠샤 이些그 천이 세비 생으로 여게 천이 세비 생으로 세고 와래 마시비 아니 균전대 디 오다 와라자란 디니 링당 통화탕 차범 계단 미계당 디니 민당 수다장 말려바니 가바 줄 세오다 디기 권도 샤바 디기 파바냠샤기 싱어로 릉보당 통화당 차와당 원바당 거와당 미개와당 아니 가서 민당 수장 말려바니 세데니 세오 얘기 미르바데 잔 디고 알다디 민당 수다장 디리 민당 수자장 말려바 아니 파바냠샤 당신지주의 댐바이나 파바냠샤 이些그 생으로 아니 요거와래 아니 파바냠샤 그 생으로 매바데 가버리 큐에나 생으로 매바인장 아니 다다 공도 샤바 그 정보다 통화라 소와 자장 라신지 동바래.
So then, what is said in this verse then is that these things don't exist. They've ceased within the perspective of that gnosis, which understands the nature of things or the way things really exist, their emptiness. So, and the evidence for that is that they're not seen at all within that the perspective of that gnosis, understanding the nature of things. And then the verse 95 gives the more evidence for that, which says that short and long, thick and thin, virtue and non-virtue, and also name and form all cease in this consciousness or awareness. And the commentary explains that within the perspective of this vision of meditative equipoise for Aryas, absorbed in meditative equipoise on the nature of things, the way things are. There's no long, there's no short, there's no thick, there's no thin, virtue, non-virtue, name and form as well. All of them are entirely stopped because they're entirely ceased. They are empty of intrinsic nature. Now, the reason that is the case is that if they were established by means of intrinsic nature, then they would be the way things actually are, the fundamental nature of things as they are, and they would then necessarily be observed by that vision of the Aryas, the meditative equipoise on nature for Aryas, and they are not.
Oh yeah, Rashi Tonde, Rashi Tumna, Damba Tuka, Damba Tumna, Leluji Tendo Chukura, Nanzu Dan Nesu Tumba, and the Dembet. So, in the Rashi Tuna Neluji Tendo Chuka, Tendo Juve, and Nelu Tatuina, Yamshaki, Chunisibi Sing or Sil Gawale, Sil Gogore, that in the Chunisibi Sing or Masibacha.
So here then, these phenomenal things described above, the earth and water, long, short, virtue, non-virtue, and so forth, if they were, they are empty of intrinsic nature. Now, if they possessed intrinsic nature, then they would be real because they appear as if they possessed intrinsic nature, but in fact they don't possess intrinsic nature. However, if they did possess intrinsic nature, then they would be real because the way in which they appear would coincide with the way in which they exist, which is itself the definition of something being real. That is, appearance and the mode of existence of the thing coincide exactly. Then if the way the thing appears and the way it exists are in sync, that is, they coincide, then the thing is real. So if phenomena, these conventional phenomena of long, short, earth, water, etc., were real, then they would be observed within the perspective of this Arya's meditative equipoise on nature. And then it would be the case, in fact, that they would, if they were so observed by that Arya's meditative equipoise, they would be real. That is, they would exist by means of their own intrinsic nature. Because if they were established by means of their own intrinsic nature, then these phenomenal things would they would become, as they appear, the way things are, and they would then necessarily be seen by this special meditative equipoise of the Arya, which is observing the true nature of things, the actual nature of things.
Oh yeah, that's the Pabanyamsha Yishiki, Masipaka, Chinisibi, Single Masipaka to Chocobatella. That Omaki, Ranjubalaso, Omaki, Mido Yishiki, Dijanam, Chin was in the Tobi. Ani 냠샤 넘바 미도 비시기 되잖아. 가서 춘이 넘바는 춘이 오순도 배 냠샤 넘바 미도 비시기 아니 되잖아 식바데 되자 가버 이놈. 다어 직주 돈이도 냠샤 이시 파반 냠샤 디 아니 되잖아 집이 직주도 그래 쓰고 와래. 다디 가바 이놈 세나 되잖아 식배에서 뒤전 파변양샤 이제 생활치 아니 저 가서 군조비 취하나 매바 인자 뒤전나 식배 대제 가바 이놈 세나 다 되게 준자되라 강마시지 남세랑 먼저 중화 대군이 됐다 되게 가르송 것도 세나 뒤전나 식바대 가바 주와 이놈 세나 민데 가마시지 남시나 세라 되네 되마네 라시지 깨와 매봐 치다나 그거 간제지 있나야 토마 매바나 라시지 주요 마주병 오코랑 깨와 인장 되네 주요 라시지 깨와 매비 아니 대 강시 아니 대 동반이 대 안에 외장 아니 가소래 라르 젠지 다시 다른 라르 젠데 아니 미 라르 지 레베 나겠다 아니 라르데 다시 라르 지 말레베 통하나시 미통하나시 라르 젠지 다시 다른 말을 비트면 마시 비칠 라시지 점이 비트는데 마시 비칠 세가나 가마시질 스테인바레
So then the next comes the explanation of this proof, further demonstration of this proof that these phenomenal things don't exist by means of their own intrinsic nature, and the first argument that or evidence that's been given is their non-appearance, so they're not being observed by the Arya's meditative equipoise within the perspective of the Arya's meditative equipoise, which is observing the true nature of things. Here, then, this is further explained by presenting further evidence for that. Here it says, now the other schools would say that if it was the case, or some other lower schools of philosophy would say that would wonder then that isn't it the case that this non-conceptual gnosis would through the destruction or the annihilation of created things it ceases their existence on that occasion. That is, when one their position would be that when one actualizes this non-conceptual gnosis, the non-conceptual gnosis actually destroys created things and ceases them in that way. It annihilates them. So if one holds that view, then that is not the case. And then the verse 96 here explains why that interpretation is incorrect. It says, all which previously appeared in awareness or consciousness due to that which was not known, later will likewise cease in awareness because one has come to know just that. Is the way they've translated it here. Now, here the explanation in the commentary is saying that
가르려서 연애 주비 와야기 아니 가서래 남 미도비 이시지 되잖음 아니 시바 말이 말이 봐 준상 가르래 sana 연애 주비 라시지 깨와 매바기 더 강시 세와 엄마네 장 여장 아니 라르 젠지 자식 미래비 왕기 아니 유랑 그 유사와 매도 왔다다 말이 빈 드림네 마시비철 세야들라 가마시질 디테레.
So here it says that which has not has been known, which has not arisen for consciousness previously. Okay, now that's my translation here of the first two lines. Here it says the explanation of that is that this is explaining how it is that this non-conceptual gnosis is not in any way destroying created things, the phenomenal things that have been listed above, the elements and so forth, all of long and short, virtue, non-virtue, those phenomenal things, which are all created things, are not being destroyed by this non-conceptual gnosis. That's not what is happening here. Rather, what is happening here is that this primordially established, primordially existing absence of things arising by means of their intrinsic nature. That this object here, this object is emptiness, which is the primordially established absence of things arising by means of intrinsic nature. That object previously, although it existed primordially from the beginning, it existed. However, we haven't previously understood this because we're obscured with respect to it by ignorance. And this ignorance is referred to as analogous to someone who possesses an eye disease in which it's actually, this eye disease is called floaters, meaning that when within the eyeball, there are these things floating around, which cause one to see as if there were hair and so forth floating around in this space in front of you. So it's a kind of ophthalmia or something like that. In any case, that eye disease causes one to see hairs and filaments and such floating around in space in front of you, but those things aren't there at all. So this kind of eye disease is analogous to the ignorance which obscures our vision, our knowledge of the primordially established non-arising nature of things.
Oh yeah. Namshela ngonje chuma tekuni sikana da karsungware sana tanda 마시에 바데 아니 소소 끼워 돈이 마도비 소소 끼워 난지 마동와 인지 돈이 도비 파배냥샤 이셰라 언제 중화 언제 중위 아니 땡지죠 최 땡진 저와 중화 땡중 랑신지 돈바 태귀니 에 가서 내루지 된 무슨도 시비 치나 시가나 언제 중화 태귀니 대시 치나
So then, here that, so because of their ignorance, ordinary persons who are have ignorance which functions to obscure this nature of things from their, prevent them from knowing it. So it's in that way that ordinary persons don't see this. However, that the emptiness itself, and for the consciousness of the Arya that understands emptiness, this emptiness, and which has existed primordially, it's not something that's newly created. Rather, it arose from the past, or always in the past, and this is another name for dependent origination. This dependent origination, that is the absence or things being empty of possessing intrinsic nature. This, for the Aryas, the consciousness of the Aryas that understand emptiness, the entirety of this object, which is the real nature of things, that is, they understand that through direct perception. Oh yeah.
남시 치니 되게 남시수 신이 대단 가봐 주를 세간라 남시수 세간라 파바냠샤 이시기 싱어로 파바냠샤 이시기 싱어로 나를 안에 땡중고 오 테니 안에 시 대달 냠샤기 신이시비 싱어로 가봐 주에 가봐 주에 나네 땡중고라 라시지 동바 인발라 치 냠샤기 인발라 냠샤기 싱어로야 라시 동바 시바레 시바 인지 세로아 신이 대다 가봐죠. 아니 시바 인지 나를 라시지 여바지 땡주 라시지 여바지 치 아니 냠샤기 싱어 라시 메바 시바 마레 라시 메바 시바 마레 대이나 아니 파베 냠샤 이샤데 나를 오지비 아니 직세도 주고래 냠샤기 난도 오지비 직세도 주고래 냠샤기 오위 직세도 되지 내루지 대해서 민주로 민주에서
내루기 지금 민주에서.
Yeah.
So then this, with respect to that consciousness here, this consciousness under discussion is the Arya's meditative equipoise. Within the consciousness here refers to the specific perspective of this vision of reality for an Arya who's engaged in meditative absorption on the true nature of things. Chini tetar gakbar kyue. Ngani rangshing tomba. Chini tetar.
Chi jela sikurwa.
Jela.
Chi singul chi ngar rangshing 가서래 신이 대단 가봐 주에서 땡중 거랑 ngar 여봐라. 아니 냠샤기 생으로 천이 세비 인샤기 땡중기 땡그 천이 세바티잖아 아니 냠샤기 천이 세비 생으로 땡중데 가봐줘야 천이 세비서 땡중 와마라 봐
춘식 지금 땡중
가산 뭐 친사인 봐 돈이 세비 생으로 근저 요아 말에 땡중 요아 말스라인 봐
땡중 요아 말스
땡중 땡중 들어와 들어와 땡중 근저로 봐
So within the context of that, this consciousness that is within the vision of this Arya's meditative equipoise on emptiness, within that, then one can say that subsequently, after one has entered into that, this is ceased. Now, the referent there of this is ceased would refer to phenomenal things existing as dependent origination. That is, that phenomenal things arise and disappear through the process of dependent origination. So that is ceased within the context of that meditative equipoise. The phenomenal appearance and disappearance of things as dependent origination. However, it's not the case that
아니 치양 라신이 동바 스바 인지 nga 라신이 여바지 아니 치 라신이 메바 스바 말에
So, however, so those phenomenal things existing in dependently originated fashion, those things cease. That is, they don't appear within the perspective of this meditative equipoise, which is absorbed on the true nature of things, or the fundamental reality of things. However, it's not the case that these things existed by means of their own intrinsic nature in the past, and then subsequently are being seen as being devoid of or not having any kind of existing by means of intrinsic nature or having intrinsic nature. That's not the case. Because if it were the case, then it would be then if that way of understanding it were the case, then that meditative equipoise itself would function to destroy existent things, functional things, and it would not, and it also would not function, become, that is, the vision of the actual nature of things, the way things actually are.
야, 다디 대단한 냠상 오고 주지 내를 대해서 봐 민주로 세가나 파반 냠상 오고 주비 주주 그래서 아니 우마란주바게 란산 캐려 봐텔라 아니 가서래 내지를 봐 소유하래 파반 냠상 오고 주주 타와 타녀대 바리 비자서도 타와 전다 봐 깨와 미기 봐 타와서네 타와 숨 내신님은 알려와 되게 나네 단냠샤 그 오지 랑신지 tum나 신이 랑신지 tum나 냠샤 바바 냠샤 오원지 주 타기래 세대다 타와 매바데 랑신지 tum나 아니 수달라 소와 아니 가소래 신이 시비 시고려나 아니 담바 주고래 아니 신이 시비 시용을 매와래 스라고 와라 탄주바기 대인 파반냠샤 아니 신이 시비 시고이나 오는 집이 주주도 다디 이셔스 말해 대만보시라고 이시다 대샤서 파반냠샤 오 주주주지 내루지 된서바 민주에서
So there's a complicated discussion that occurs between the Prasangikas and the Swatantrika Madhyamikas about this. That is, the question of the Swatantrika holds the position that things exist by means of their own intrinsic nature. They have some kind of intrinsic nature. So that being the case, then, if they say to the Prasangikas that if things don't have some kind of intrinsic nature that's identifiable and findable, then it would be the case that, in fact, this arias gnosis absorbed on the meditative concentration on emptiness would in fact destroy, actually annihilate phenomenal things. But the Prasangika response to that is that no, that's not the case. In fact, the opposite obtains, that it's only because things don't possess intrinsic nature that it's not the case that the non-observation of phenomenal things within the perspective of the Ari's meditative equipoise on reality, that they're not destroyed in that way. So this is complicated, and we'll not go into the details of this here.
다 전다 저우디 가서 천이 파반냠샤 이些그 신이 시비 생활의 연하양 연주인 먹과체 다 가상 뭐 아주 대소와 군소비 최의 수자라서와 군소비 최대다 파반냠샤 이些그 신이 시비 생활의 연하 아니 가서래 청 신이 시비 생활 매와래 연하 가르래서나 된소 신이 돼 나네 준비 최체 뭐 파반냠샤 그 이些그 신이 시비 생활의 요인상 우리 군소비 최대다 나네 믿어봐 나주다 나주 마든바 인상 나주다 내주 믿음바데 아니 천이 파반냠 가서랑 나유도 집에 놀라 나와다 마주바데 된다된 말이에요. 그래서
나유를
랑 나와다 마주바 나와다 마주바 된다바 추와 나장 된다도 마주바 랑게 천이 추와 나야 랑게 천이 마주바데 된다된 말이에요. 대인다 천이 파반냠샤 이시 그 천이 시비 생을 매바데 된다된 바체 천이 파반냠샤 이시 그 생을 춤나 덴바 추고래 덴바 인고래 덴바 춤나 나와다 추고래 나와다 춤나 천이 인고래 아니 로아 수달로서와 다 매야 이제 테레 나와다 춤나 천이 인고래.
So here then, the basic point is that within the perspective of this arias gnosis, which is seeing the true nature of things, or the true nature of things, that is, here it's dharmata, the true nature of things, or it's another name for emptiness here. Within the sort of experience or the vision itself, there's no phenomenal things don't appear at all. They're completely absent, non-existent within the perspective of that gnosis, which is seeing the true nature of things. The reason this is the case is that phenomenal things like visible objects, sounds, smells, tastes, etc. All of these phenomenal things, by their very character, have a kind of have a character which is that the way they appear does not coincide with the way they actually exist. They appear to us as if they existed by means of their own intrinsic nature, as if they possessed intrinsic identity. But in fact, they do not possess intrinsic identity. They do not have any kind of intrinsic nature at all. So that disparity or discordance between the way in which they appear and the way they exist it demonstrates, or is in fact, is the fact that they're unreal. Appearing one way, existing another, entails that something is unreal. Emptiness, on the other hand, when it's cognized within this awareness or consciousness of the Arya's gnosis absorbed in meditative equipoise on reality, that exists as it appears. It's the true nature of things, and there's no disparity between the way it appears and the way it exists. So because emptiness has that special quality of having the way it appears and the way it exists coincide, then one can say that it is real. It does exist as it appears, and thus, when within the context of that meditative equipoise absorbed on the true nature of things, emptiness, the phenomenal things are absent. They simply don't exist within that vision.
Sanje Shindu Mide Puaye Dogananda Jeba Sho Yedang Ururaname Kani Adaya